welcome to Playwright, a podcast about creating and sharing new ways to play. My name is Ryan Hamann. For all intents and purposes on this show, I am to be called H.
And I'm Ryan Quintal. You can call me Q.
I just got back from a weekend in Canada, and it's nice, kind of getting away from the constant madness that is the American news cycle and just enjoying some of that fresh mountain air.
H, you have been globetrotting lately. I feel like I have stood still and you have been visiting our friends across the pond. You've been up to Canada now. This is exciting movement.
Yeah, and it's not that I can afford it either. It's just opportunities arising, friends inviting me along, and it's hard to say no. Getting to see new things and meet new people and go different places. It's fun.
Now, are you playing any games on the road?
Yeah, I've been plugging away on the new Metroid. That's a nice handheld travel game. It's good fun. It's one of those that I feel like if I set it down, I'm going to immediately forget everything that I had known up to that point and have to really spend a lot of time backtracking. So I'm trying to not let it ever escape my short-term memory.
I feel similarly. I've been playing SteamWorld Dig 2, which of course is very inspired by the Metroid series. So it's funny to see that and this game come out in the same year.
Yeah. SteamWorld Dig 2. I'm looking forward to that. Is that different than SteamWorld Dig 1, or is it kind of more of the same, which would be fine with me?
Yeah, it's true. It's a lot more of the same, but with way expanded movement mechanics and almost Zelda-like challenge dungeons in the midst of it. But I could talk about existing games all day, and I know you want to hear some fresh new games.
Yeah, okay. I can do that. As much fun as existing games are, let's venture into the realm of fantasy, of speculative fiction.
Our realm.
So, what are you bringing us today?
The concept is very simple, so I'll keep the pitch to this. A multiplayer competitive game that is 2, 3, or 4 players, first-person shooter in the style of 2016's Doom, where when you kill monsters, they appear in the room with one of the other players. So everybody is basically in one single room. Everybody starts off with, say, 5 or 10 bad guys in their room of various types. And as you defeat these things, they journey into somebody else's screen, and you can imagine a one-on-one is essentially a tug of war, right? Who can load the other person up with more bad guys, and who is the first to eliminate all of their bad guys.
Let's start the clock there and see where we can take this. One of the things that it makes me think of is, and I'm going to get the name of it wrong because there's so many of these damn games, but is it Tetris Attack on the N64?
I think so, yeah. This certainly was inspired in part by Tetris.
Yeah. Or like the multiplayer Tetris modes or Puyo Puyo Tetris did it recently on the Switch and the PS4, where if you're playing against an opponent and you score certain score multipliers on Tetris, if you get a good line clear on Tetris, then you can send bad blocks into your opponent's Tetris game and essentially just kind of ruin their flow. And so that would be kind of neat to think through ways to stylishly combo certain enemy combinations to mess up your opponent even more. Like if you were able to kill 2 of them in one shot by lining up headshots, or melee 3 of them in one swipe, and then that could do even more damage, or send 12 creatures instead of just the 3 over to your opponent's room.
Yeah, and what I was thinking about is ways to modify this where in Doom, if you get a melee kill, you get something special. So maybe regular shooting gives you one thing, but a melee kill or something that's more difficult to pull off could get you some sort of rage meter. So 2 people are essentially like a fighting game trying to build up their super meter so they can go into crazy mode and eliminate a bunch of bad guys in one big swath, whether that's a single hit or they're able to be empowered and in rapid succession tear a bunch of guys apart and quickly turn the tides on their opponent.
I also like that this one could benefit from screen looking.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a way that's actually beneficial to the flow of the game. Because I remember people used to get so mad at people when they thought that they were looking at somebody else's screen, when really That's kind of just another, like it takes some mental rotation of the image and some quick coordination. You're looking away from your screen, so there is some risk reward to screen looking as well. And I thought, it's a valid way of gaining information. The split screen's right there. Why wouldn't you screen look? So I like that this and what is that game? Screen Sheet? Is that what it's called? The game where all the players are invisible, but if you look on their screen, you can locate them and shoot them in this first-person shooter space.
This was also inspired by a bar game that I had played. I don't know if there's a West Coast colloquialism for this, but it's called Puckett. And Puckett essentially is two people taking what amounts to essentially a checker piece and bouncing it off of a rubber band sort of mechanism on their end and trying to shoot it through a very tiny hole and get it over into the opponent's side. And the point of the game is to empty your side and have all your pucks make it through the hole into the opponent's side.
Okay.
Yeah, I like the idea of clearing out my room and seeing this other person's room. Whether this is a screen sheet or not, it's almost just enjoying seeing the other person get totally loaded up and overwhelmed with bad guys. But likewise, that's what tug of war is all about. Now that person has some leverage. They have a lot more bad guys they could potentially deposit in your world. And I think if you start mixing this up with flying creatures, maybe one person's like, oh, I'm going to get all the flying creatures first because those are a real pain to deal with for the other person and what kind of strategy ensues.
Yeah, there's so many good risk reward balances here. Like maybe killing with different weapons can send different types of creatures. Like you could have one weapon that blends 2 or 3 of the creatures and sends a boss creature to the other end. Or maybe you kind of wait for your opponent to empty out their room before you kill everything all at once and send them all back at the same time. Or maybe you both kind of gang up on one particular player and load their room full of monsters and, just keep sending them back. But I like also, maybe these rooms are more kind of complex battlescapes like you would see in Doom 2016, like a multi-tiered giant level with hordes of Serious Sam kind of enemies instead of just like a blank room like you got at the end of Half-Life 1, Half-Life 2, Half-Life 1, I think it was, where you just jumped in a room full of enemies.
There's also this moment that happens in first-person shooters, especially ones that are all about momentum, where you have kind of the one last bad guy that's lingering somewhere in the room before the door can unlock or whatever. So you have this moment where you have to scour the place looking to find him, shambling behind some lockers or something. And that is potentially devastating in a setup like this, because all that time you're not disposing of this creature is time that people can deposit others into your world.
What if any time that a creature spends not dying, it's constantly getting stronger and evolving? And so each creature has its own kind of little timer on it. And you get to pause the timer by killing it for 3 seconds, 5 seconds or whatever. But as it's just running free in the field, it'll constantly be getting stronger, and then every once in a while it'll hit kind of evolutionary steps and become kind of the next. And so it's a way of also, since this is constantly happening throughout the battle, intensifying the game as it goes to make it more difficult to stay alive for everybody at the same time.
Yeah, kind of kill these things while they're in larva form, because down the line it's going to be impossible to get rid of.
It's easy at the beginning, it's nice in a warm-up space, so the players get used to kind of volleying these creatures back and forth, but pretty soon everyone's fighting for their lives.
Yeah, and you could even layer on stuff where if one person and the second person, or 3 or 4 people, whatever, kill the same type of enemy, either simultaneously or in quick succession, that could spawn in that boss-like thing or create some sort of havoc mode for everyone.
Yeah, kind of like a Mario Party type rules, where if something serendipitous happens on 3 screens, then the 4th screen that wasn't involved is penalized in some way, having a supreme monster being dropped into their map. Or I like this kind of match 3 elements of this game as well, where you can combo a lot of creatures of one type in rapid succession, or if you only kill the flying enemies 12 in a row without killing anything in between, then you get a super, flying monster in your opponent's realm.
Oh yeah, you could incentivize maybe building up combo, and that helps you, whether that builds your meter or whatever. And I love the social context of 4 people playing at the same time, 3 people doing something in harmony. And of course, these rules are not explicit, right? Everyone just goes into the game just going, I don't quite know how this works. I just know I got to kill everything. And for that fourth person to be like, what, you guys were all killing the giant shaky things? Like, I didn't know. And that's what puts them at a disadvantage is really funny.
And a giant sandworm comes out of the ground in their realm.
Yeah. It's so funny. I say shaky things. The amorphous bad guys in modern first-person shooters are sometimes so hard to describe.
A possible sequel for this could work equally well as like a character action type game, kind of like a Devil May Cry or a Bayonetta. Maybe even a DLC mode onto that is one person plays a character action game, one person plays a first-person shooter, and you're volleying these same enemies back and forth.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, it's funny because you mentioned Puyo Puyo Tetris, and that was also in my mind of like these kind of 2 games happening at the same time. So how could one person have that asymmetrical feeling?
It would also be neat if you had a way of like crafting guns as you went as well. And so whether that's, finding pickups on the map and kind of tethering them to the gun that you've already got, kind of like your gun baby. Is that the name we settled on for that one?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and that's great. Like if you have the old school style Quake or Doom, power-ups sitting around for, person gets suddenly, they get a rocket launcher with 3 shots in it, or they get, shield. Because I think even though you're killing bad guys, you do still have to manage staying alive. You're not invincible in this world.
That's cool. That's all the time we have on that one. But I do like this idea a lot. I think we're off to a strong start so far. Don't kill that momentum. Give us a good name.
Oh, God. This is where I do kill the momentum. I've been thinking of something like Tug of War or... at one point I was calling it Monster Tennis.
How about KILLSCREEN? That has to be, it doesn't look like it's used after a quick Google as far as the name of a game, but do you know what that concept refers to?
A kill screen is like the impossible to beat level or something, right?
Yeah, kind of. It's like on old arcade games and old like 8-bit cartridges sometimes, when you would progress so far in the game that basically the memory doesn't have anything left to pull from. And so it just kind of like gives you a glitchy mess of a level that is like the game trying to make sense of the fact that there's no more data. And so it's kind of like looping onto earlier data. Getting to the kill screen was kind of like your final task that experts would try to achieve in a lot of these games. But it also kind of describes what you would be doing in the course of this game.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're basically clearing all the monsters out of memory, and I think the person who loses could glitch out or whatever, like kill screen is ascending and winning. That's really cool. Let's call it that.
All right, kill screen then. Cool. Can't believe we're first on that one. We can't be. There has to be a game called
No,
kill screen out there.
Something's going to happen.
All you itch.io warriors, let us know. Anyways, I have a game that is possibly intentionally frustrating. Let's see how this goes. What I want to pitch is a text adventure game where you play somebody who has a strong accent playing a video game that is controlled by speech.
Oh boy.
And so essentially they're playing a text adventure game using like a voice to text type thing. It's like one of those early prototype games where, back in the early days of PC, where a developer would say, hey, we have some new technology. It's going to make our game stand out on the market. It's going to be, you just speak and the game interprets it as text. And back when that was like really novel. But you play as somebody for whom the game reliably gets your commands wrong. So, you would say like, go north. And it'd say like, how did you know about Oreth, our dwarven companion? And so everything that you say, it accidentally taps into another aspect of this game. And so basically the task of creating this game would be to create items and locations and characters and stuff that could be accidentally triggered by something being pronounced incorrectly or interpreted incorrectly by the computer. So I'm going to leave that there and see where we go with this.
This is cool. It's going to require a big old database full of words that mostly kind of rhyme with other words or a few letters off from other words, right?
Potentially, although if you'll remember, a lot of those early text-to-speech things sometimes weren't even close. And so a lot of this would kind of be building up an understanding of not the game's language necessarily, because it's also in English, but the game's understanding of your language. So if you have your companion Oreth and you want to use him in battle or to talk to him or something, then you would have to remember, I type in North to talk to him.
That's really cool. And I keep going and thinking about... There was an old Mac game, and I don't know if you did this in class, but to get the computer text to voice to say perhaps profanity, you would have to type in something that is phonetically unmistakable for the sounds that you wanted to create. So I like that idea of bomb, for example, does not have a B at the end of it and things like that, where you're just you're almost trying to speak to the computer in the way that you know that the machine will give you the correct output.
Right. And a lot of this comes back to a lot of early PC games were made on sometimes a real shoestring budget just in somebody's attic. Sometimes you would have to, maybe the game was programmed for a different system and yours could kind of run it and kind of mess up every once in a while, and there were a lot of like side steps that you'd have to take to get it to work, and there were certain rooms that you would remember not to enter because the game would glitch out, and so all these kind of things that you had to keep in mind while you were playing old games. And new games have become a lot more smoothed over as a commercial property. You don't get a lot of those same... You get game-breaking bugs every once in a while, but you don't get those same kinds of like, all right, I just have to remember not to do this, and I have to remember to do this in this way, and I have to remember to, rotate the analog stick in a full circle if I want it to duck correctly, and all this kind of like procedural memory stuff that you would have to do. And so I like this idea of, it's not only just funny because it's frustrating or funny because it's behaving incorrectly, but also it kind of makes it a little bit more endearing and kind of gives it a little bit more personality. You really feel like you're just working with another really stupid person.
And it actually, I feel like in a good way, builds empathy for people that do have thick accents that are forced to use our ever more voice-controlled future. You triggered your Google Home a couple seconds before we started the episode for seemingly no reason at all, it seemed like. I wonder if we're going to need some sort of conversation. You think it's going to be free-form text entry like a text adventure game, or does it almost have to be, because of the accent, Skyrim-like in its conversational approach?
I think it would have to be free-form, because if you were to just enter A and it always, A in the option of like A, B, C, and D for dialogue options, and that wouldn't really...
Yeah, you just go
There's
through
no
the
fun
options.
way to spin that, right? Unless it just like always guesses the wrong answer. And then it's just kind of like, I don't know, that feels more annoying. But if somebody asks you like, where are you going? And you say the castle, and they say to Bastille, I don't understand, and so trying to work with very limited free text entry.
I'm trying to think about the way that I can, as the player, build up an understanding of the abstraction without the computer eventually needing to just kind of say words at me that it wants me to approximate. Like, I wonder if I type in something like go there and I see the character who's playing the text adventure type in like go hair or something, something similar, but I can start to understand in what ways their accent is expressed. So then I almost, like by the end of the game, somebody is able to rattle off a bunch of things that are potentially funny sounding, right? Especially if they were talking to other players about them. People who love the game would be like, yeah, did you remember to grab the carrot? Haha, we all know what that really means. Yeah, so I like enter something and then I see it incorrectly typed by the player or something like that. So I kind of know what the translation of my input was, or do you think that's too obvious?
Well, I mean, within the fiction, the character that you are playing as, I always picture them as being kind of like Dutch or Northern European, having that strong Scandinavian accent even, that they aren't actually typing, like they are speaking into a microphone. So really, like the level is just like you, the actual real life human, is typing into the computer, and then the computer is interpreting what the character that you're playing as had said aloud. So, they aren't really typing. But one of the things I always get hung up on when I come back to this idea is that it's fun to stumble upon things that you're not supposed to see yet, accidentally triggering a piece of information by doing something as simple as saying like, open inventory, and then that opens purgatory. So accidentally stumbling upon things is fun, but maybe actually doing those simple tasks isn't fun. If going east always triggers something else, like that's a fun discovery, but then how do you actually go east?
Right.
How do you complete the game at this point? Maybe it's more of have you ever played Twine games?
No, I haven't.
Okay, they're browser-based games. They're really easy to program, and it's a good tool for branching out ideas. And you can leave text links in the middle of your paragraphs, and it's just like a nice way to build out text adventures, essentially. And so maybe something like that, where it's always telling a story, and as you enter your choices, you're always kind of moving forward in a story, just finding different things along the way each time. And you aren't necessarily trying to complete the game, but you could replay it from the beginning once you get one of like the 72 possible endings.
And I even, not to further complicate things, because there's a lot the player has to kind of deal with at this point, but I love the idea of having to potentially say if you swapped the abstraction of the language barrier to encountering players or NPCs rather in the game that are from different parts of the world and having to speak to them in kind of their accent to get them to understand what you want them to do is also kind of interesting to me. We talked about you're playing somebody who is essentially getting bad translation into a text game, which without that level of abstraction, it's almost someone battling with a bad voice assistant, right?
Yeah. It would also be kind of fun if every once in a while the game would break away from like the game that they're playing and give us some insights into their real life as well. And so in some chapters, maybe the font would change or something. You are essentially roaming your own house and learning about this guy's life and real life implications of being limited by a language that is only spoken in a very regional part of the country that he's from, and some of the implications of that to kind of like drive the point home of how language can isolate people, feeling like the world isn't catering to you and your language, and some of the frustrations that come with that.
That's interesting, especially if you have, assuming this is at the time text games might be popular, so you could go back in time and do like email or letters or postcards as a way of communicating. And if you have a small circle of friends who are gaming with you, then they're talking to you in your language and they're like, hey, did you find the sword? And now suddenly that's information you can take in the real world, whether it's from talking to your virtual friends, and then bring that back into the game. Okay, I know there's a sword now, so I can begin hunting around and trying to find how I get it.
Yeah, or if you have another friend with the same accent playing the same game, and you can kind of like send you letters every once in a while, kind of like in a Little Inferno, and give you little hints.
Yeah. It's like I had to say Borth to get it to go north or whatever. Yeah. So you do have those nudges along the way, and maybe, there can be triggers built in to kind of understand when you're stuck and have him be your Navi, him or her.
Yeah, well, anyways, I have to close the book there. I have to come up with a name for this one. And I'm thinking something that evokes the idea of an old, like, DOS game that might be kind of shoddily made and deals with poor translation of language. So I'm going to call this one Voice of Champion.
That's perfect.
Right, well, we have one more pitch today, and this comes from the community. This comes from our friend Sam Quirke, who says, 2 games that I've enjoyed playing through recently have been Picross 3D Round 2 and The Witness. I heartily endorse both of those. I've always adored the Picross as a puzzle mechanic, and I think it would work really well in the subgenre of puzzle walking simulator that seems to be so in vogue, especially now that it's been proven that Picross can really work in a 3D space. I imagine a sculptor awakening alone on a grayscale island mostly populated by oblong monoliths of various dimensions. Each is a Picross 3D puzzle to be carved out, revealing the color and form of the island village he once called home. Some sculpting blocks will reveal themselves to be buildings or vehicles, maybe even people, which trigger audio diary-style memories and narrative clues. Some smaller blocks might become keys or inventory objects once solved, which in turn become part of the solution to a more complex puzzle ahead. For example, you might find a large puzzle seemingly impossible to complete because there aren't enough numerical reference points on the block. If you look around, there's a smaller puzzle to complete on the floor which reveals itself to be the number 4. Now you just need to work out where to hang it so that the larger puzzle becomes manageable. Those are just a couple of ideas. I would love to incorporate some of the perspective-based genius of The Witness in there too, but I'll let you guys run with it from here. All right, and we will start the clock.
Sam coming at us with another banger here.
Yeah, I like this. I love The Witness. I really like Picross Round 2 as well. I've been playing recently a game called Paint It Back, which is crazy because for the first probably 10 hours that I was playing it, I thought it was called Paint It Black, like the Rolling Stones song.
Oh, yeah.
And I've been misreading it this whole time. I felt a little betrayed once I realized. But anyways, the game is a Picross game for the computer, essentially. But it has like a narrative framing device, so to speak, where each of the puzzles are a painting in a gallery. And every once in a while, like every few puzzles is an exhibit, and they all have a similar theme. So you're just kind of like working through various exhibits and opening this museum as you go and kind of gaining prestige, which is a nice way to present it. It doesn't do anything meaningful with it necessarily in the gameplay, but framing a Picross game in a narrative context is definitely doable. And I like the way that this one sets it up. My only concern would be, I feel like The Witness is so perfect that it's hard to think of other directions to take this that aren't just like a Witness copy, because it's just so good.
I started to think about where to improve this because like The Witness is great and Picross, especially Picross 3D, is so cool, and it's almost like you don't want to mess with either of those two things too much. But what I do think we could look at this in terms of the island itself. I pictured in my head as Sam began to describe it, not as, kind of an island with a series of monoliths on it, but rather the island itself is the kind of Picross 3D giant cube that you're on and requires, physical understanding of location and direction to move or shift around items or select items and get rid of them, and you're carving away at the world until you're at like the deepest points in the world and finding out the secrets therein.
Kind of like that Pierre Molino game about tapping that cube.
Yeah.
How about this as an extension of that idea, perhaps even going in the opposite direction? Something very Katamari focused. Have you ever played a Katamari game before?
Yeah, I love them.
In some of the games, I know Katamari Forever did this. I'm not sure if any of the others did, because that's the only one that I've played like to the very bitter end. But in that game, you play on kind of like ever shifting scale. And so you start off really small and just kind of rolling up the sugar cubes on a tea set. And you get to the point where eventually you're rolling up entire planets and rolling up galaxies and everything in between, really. And so maybe you start off in the city on a very small scale and you're just kind of solving puzzles within a cafe. And as you're solving them, it kind of like feeds your character energy. Each solved puzzle feeds you energy. And as you gain more energy, then you can grow to the next level. And all of a sudden, all of the puzzles that you solved are in a small portion of the overall game space, and it kind of recontextualizes some of those shapes that you had seen before to be small pieces on larger grids. And, if this is in a city, then everything's already skyscrapers and rectangular shapes that can be carved away into something greater. And then, you pull back from that and it's just like a lawn ornament in somebody's yard or whatever, it can kind of go any direction, but always kind of pulling back.
This is a twist that might turn some Witness fans off, but I think that the Witness, one of the things it had a tendency to be is a little, let's use the word pretentious about the worldview that it wanted you to kind of at least look through the lens of. It would almost be interesting to me is if you took the Witness style and go back to Sam's, monoliths on an island, combine it with your exhibits, so things being in a theme, and going into these sections of the world and have each of them almost, when you complete a series of, say, 5 or something, what I think the Witness could have used is a reward other than here's more puzzles. So I almost want to lean into something like an Edith Finch here, where completing 5, 10, whatever, however many puzzles maybe unlocks a portal or a gateway and you experience a piece of a story or a small complete story. And it's essentially about going across this land, doing the puzzles to unlock the gateways and experience these vignettes. And in that way, it doesn't necessarily have to be in any order, right? You can do the difficulty as you choose.
Yeah, and if you're playing like an artist or something, and you are in these various scenarios in different locations, just kind of like creating sculptures or creating statues or something, which is a very Picross 3D way to frame it already, then it would make sense that you might be memorializing something that had happened there or celebrating an event or putting together decorations for some kind of a parade maybe. It gives you some opportunities to explore, like artistically, looking back on important events that had happened there.
Sure, and I think it unlocks, in Picross 3D, what's going to be in the center is going to be like a puppy or Mario or something, right? Where you could be chiseling away at a piece of a Picross puzzle and see potentially a murder weapon or a piece of a statue. And so you can tie mystery into pieces of the puzzle that like you want to solve this puzzle to find out what the heck the rest of this thing is. And then when you finally do see it, the ability to, even as simple as just play an audio tape that describes what this thing is and where it's from or what the memory is, I think is really cool.
There's a game that I've played recently. I don't think it's out yet. It's a local game in development. It's about perspective. I don't want to give away their entire concept if they're still working on it and aren't ready for it to be public yet, but
sure.
It's kind of it's like a first-person puzzler type game that incorporates like shifting the size of objects depending on the perspective from which they're viewed. Maybe you can incorporate something like that as well, where as you create portions of the puzzle, then that creates like a small little dollhouse-sized room for you to go into, and that is where the next puzzle can take place, and it can kind of shrink, kind of like the opposite of that kind of Katamari-like idea.
Yeah, that's really cool.
It was kind of going into spaces.
Yeah, and being able to pull out, and just like the Witness does do, which is they have these tiny little puzzles, and spoiler for people who haven't played the Witness, there's also much larger puzzles that are based on perspective that also are part of the world. So that second layer, I think, is that revelation that makes the Witness so good and could potentially be really extraordinary, especially when you're thinking of, the way Picross mechanics can work and can be a lot more detail oriented.
Yeah, essentially, I guess instead of, lines with circles on the end of it, like you'd be looking for in the Witness, here you'd be looking for cubes or oblong cubes. I don't know. Do those have a name, like rectangular cubes? Probably do.
I think they're not cubes. They might just be polygons.
All right. Yeah, so you're just always kind of looking for those, I guess, 6-sided polygons.
Yeah.
That can materialize in a certain perspective on the world. And if you lock into that perspective and click on the right area, then you can engage in this puzzle. And maybe as you're carving away at this shape that it wants to reveal, maybe even, it can carve a statue into the side of a mountain. And since that portion of the mountain is now gone, it opens a cave that you can enter the mountain now. and explore more of the world that way.
Yeah, that's really cool.
You're always subtracting in Picross 3D. You're always carving away, just like a real sculptor. So maybe, using that to the advantage of the player.
Yeah, and it allows you to experiment again with that Katamari type of scale of maybe the thing that you're carving away in that giant thing is actually 10 monoliths worth of puzzles, or the true puzzle inside of a puzzle.
Yeah, that's really cool. Oh, man, we could unpack this puzzle box as far as it will go, but we have to call it a day there. And Sam Quirke, thank you for that one. Sam Quirke does put forth a name. He says Picross Island, but he says that it's a boring name and maybe we can do better. He might be overestimating our naming skills.
Yeah, these days we've been in a little bit of a name funk, huh?
Name funk. That's not a bad name for another podcast.
Maybe, why don't we abstract it and just go like Crossroads or Crossroad Island?
Yeah. I was thinking because like Picross, that has so many good like pun opportunities.
Yeah.
Picross Roads or Picross the Universe.
That's also very good too.
Because that is also what you're doing, is Picrossing the universe.
That's cool.
All right. Well, anyways, thank you, Sam, for that one. If you, the listener, not you, Q, although, I mean, nothing's stopping you really.
It's true. Although I have my platform. Yes.
Yes, you know where I'm going with this. If you, the listener, would like to pitch us a game and would like to have it read and discussed on this show to bask in that glory for 1 week, then you can send that off to playwrightcast@gmail.com, or you can throw it on our newly updated and improved website. Go give that a look. It looks really pretty now. I mean, it did before, but Ryan Q did a wonderful job of revamping that and getting it up to October 2017 standards. It's
true.
Constantly evolving webscape that we're always chasing after. But anyways, that is at that is not Picross. No, that is at playwrightcast.com. And if you want to go directly to the pitching portal, that is playwrightcast.com/pitch.
Yep. And special thank you to Protodome for our theme song, Hello World. It's from the album Blue Noise. It's really good. And you can get to it from the new playwrightcast.com.
Oh, good. Well, anyways, Q, why don't you take us out with just a little nugget, a little something to chew on.
Age of Empires set in the Fallout universe.
We will see you again next time.
Bye.